May I kindly request the professors to take off their caps? I open this session with a prayer. May the spirit of wisdom and mercy grow and blossom in all of us. Please be seated. I welcome you to this academic session on the occasion of the public PhD defense of the dissertation Ageism in the Use and Design of Digital Technology of Itay Mannheim. The PhD committee consists of the following professors. Online, we have Professor Myrtle Klingebiel from Linköping University. We have Professor Peine from the Open University, Dr. Neven from the University of Applied Sciences, Dr. Lu from the Technical University in Eindhoven. We have Professor Laux from Tilburg University and Professor Bongers from Tilburg University. The supervisors are Professor Evelyn Wouters and Dr. van Zalen. Before we start the defense, I would like to give the esteemed PhD candidate the floor to give a concise summary of his research in terms that can be understood by the general public.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor and privilege to be here today and to tell you about my dissertation about ageism in the use and design of digital technology. I want to start with an optimistic note that we are all aging, and that is actually one of the greatest success of our times. We live longer lives, but more importantly, we live longer years in good health, and this is a new opportunity for all of us to experience new experiences, learn, renew, and have social relationships, and basically enjoy life. One of the main theories in relation to how we age is the theory of successful aging, which is actually a group of theories that mainly define success on 3 levels: avoidance of disease, maintaining physical and cognitive function, and keeping an active life. Nevertheless, this theory is very successful also in shaping policy, but it also has a critique that it shapes a criteria to what is successful and what is not successful aging. And as such, it also draws a line on images of aging that can also be negative, based on stereotypes and disregard life events, motivation, and emotion. And such negative perceptions can also be defined as ageism, which is comprised of stereotypes, prejudice, and discrimination towards a person because of their age. Ageism can be positive or negative. We learn about stereotypes about age our whole lives, and eventually we might implicitly or without awareness apply them to others and also to ourselves. But importantly, ageism is still an urgent issue because it's still socially acceptable and in many ways still institutionalized. And most importantly, ageism is also harmful. It can harm our health and it can harm our well-being. And the context of ageism has been studied in the context of work and healthcare and legislation, but at the beginning point of this dissertation, it was not as much studied in relation to digital technology, which is an aspect that relates to many of our daily routines and many of our daily actions. So at the beginning point of this dissertation, I was asking myself, what does ageism in the context of digital technology look like? And I will try to explain this with a short example and demonstrate this. And this is a screen of an app, an exercise app that I was trying out. And when I was doing the setup for this app, this was one of the first screens. What is your age range? So I will tell you, I'm close to my 40s, and looking at this, I understand that I'm probably already walking a bit crooked. I look a bit stressed comparing to the jolly 30s. But if you're already 60, it looks like you're already walking with a cane. And besides that, we also see the absence of people above 70 or 80. And we don't know if behind this, whoever designed this app, is the assumption that perhaps people in their 70s do not do sports, or perhaps the assumptions that they cannot use apps or technology, or perhaps that everyone above 60 is the same. And I think this example also shows that use and design of technology are actually interrelated together. So at the beginning of my dissertation, as I said, there was no empirical research, and therefore the aim and goal of my project was quite broad, and in a way very explorative, to try to understand the manifestations of ageism in the context of digital technology, and its possible theoretical role as a factor that may affect design, acceptance, and use. And to tackle this kind of wide goal, I used the mixed method approach, both quantitative and qualitative research, looking both at the context of use and design, and also from different perspectives of different stakeholders, including, of course, the older persons, professionals, and the designers and researchers. So I want to share some of the findings that I found, and in the context of design of digital technology, I identified several manifestations of ageism. First of all, that there's an intergenerational gap between how younger people and younger designers and researchers see older persons. And here we see that many times the image of aging is dependent on images of frailty and decline. And this can affect the discourse on aging and technology, which many times sees this frailty or vulnerability or sees the challenges of aging and sees technology as a solution. This can also lead to exclusion, complete exclusion from research and design of technology, but also to more subtle ways of exclusion. For example, in the design process, not involving older persons from the beginning, but only when you test the product and there's not much you can actually change. Or for example, sampling older persons that are not necessarily part of the target group of a certain technology, and mainly focusing on younger, older adults, healthier, more educated, and more tech capable. Importantly, this can also influence decisions that are made in the design process, and we saw several of these examples. On the bright side, I saw also from research into the literature and also from the perspective of older persons that a possible solution was defined as the ultimate partnership, in which this ideal vision is that older persons are involved from the beginning of the design process, from the idea phase, throughout the design process, in an iterative way in which their feedback is accounted for, and they have an actual say in the technologies that are designed for their use and needs. Looking at the context of use, I was looking at the attitudes towards older adults using technology. And from the perspective of older adults, there's also a gap that I also mentioned before. Technology acceptance is viewed by younger persons and theoretical models of technology acceptance. Age is viewed in these models as a barrier to use of technology. Whereas from the perspective of older persons, they have more positive attitudes to using digital technology and for using digital technology for diverse needs. Importantly, I found initial evidence that not chronological age, but self-ageism may be a better explainer of using or not using digital technology. I also examined this from the perspective of healthcare professionals, and here I identified what I called a healthcare paradox. Because most of the digital technologies in the context of age tech are designed in the context of care and healthcare, this means that the healthcare professionals are in the forefront of using these technologies. However, the healthcare professionals in our studies were identified as having very negative attitudes towards older persons' abilities to use technologies, and this raises the question if and how they use it in digital technology-based treatment. More so, I identified that a possible influence on negative attitudes could be social comparison and implicit effects of, for example, thinking about young or old persons. So all these studies were eventually combined into a theoretical model in which it comprises of a few layers. And the first layer is the layer of ageism, which is a multifaceted variable. And ageism can affect manifestations in relation to use and acceptance of digital technology on different levels. On the micro level, the individual level, self-ageism, for example, I'm too old to use a certain technology. On the social interaction level, for example, healthcare professionals that are using technologies with older persons. And on the macro level of design and policy of services and products relating to technology and older persons. Importantly, these levels can also interact among each other, and this can also reshape our image of aging and ageism. On the positive note, this also means that we can try to create interventions and to create a more positive cycle. For example, having positive interactions around technology can positively impact our views on aging and create a new and more positive cycle. So on this positive note, I want to conclude with some recommendations and future directions. First of all, we need to change the discourse on age and raise awareness to the diversity of older persons and to the possible effects, harmful effects of ageism. One way to do so is to create partnerships in the design process and research in which older adults are involved in a meaningful way. Another form of intervention should target older persons and empower older persons to overcome self-ageism and to increase their use of digital technology. And finally, my dissertation looked at digital technology in a very broad sense, and further research exploring to implementation of other kinds of technologies, for example, robotics, AI, which is something that I'm starting to do today, and try to explore different methods to expand and generalize this model that I just presented to you. I hereby declare that this thesis is my own work and that during my PhD program, I operated according to the principles of scientific integrity, honest and careful, critical and transparent, independent and impartial. I want to thank you for listening and hope that after this presentation, you will also change your views on aging, say no to ageism, and create a world for all ages. Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to give the floor to our first opponent, which is Professor Motter-Klingebier.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Esteemed doctoral candidate, I have two questions basically. The first is based on the impression that the theoretical part of the study discusses aging, ageism, digital technology, discrimination, exclusion, and well-being thoroughly, but there seems to be a kind of a tension between the framework's conceptual model and the theoretical considerations. And my question is, according to the model, ageism affects use and acceptance through stakeholders' design and interactions. And based on your theoretical work, could you elaborate on the model, especially on how ageism directly and in this model unidirectionally impacts design and how this is addressed in the analysis?
Highly esteemed opponent, thank you for this question. Initially, the framework that I was trying to, it was more of a working framework of how ageism may affect the use and design of technology. And the view in the beginning is that it views that it could affect this through the different stakeholders that are involved and through the design process. After triangulating all the results, I refined this into a more accurate model, which I presented also in the presentation. And here I see the influence of ageism as something that is multifaceted. So it can affect on different levels. It, of course, affects the stakeholders. This is incorporated into also the final model, whether it's the older persons themselves on the micro level, but also on the social interaction meso level. So, for example, if it's healthcare professionals. So this is also incorporated into the final model, but in a more refined way that is, of course, more developed in how I could view this in the beginning based on the triangulation of the results.
Yes, I'm happy to hear this, that there is, of course, a development of this, of the model. And I think it's also fully adequate to further develop it in that sense. My question also focuses on the impact of ageism on design, where you have a direct impact on ageism on design, not through the stakeholders where you list the designers, but what is the direct impact of ageism on design without the stakeholders?
Highly esteemed opponent, if I understand the question, it's about how ageism can affect the stakeholders involved in the design process. And
no, how can it do without? Because you have a direct effect on ageism on design and an indirect effect through stakeholders.
Highly esteemed opponent, thank you for the clarification. Ageism, I think, is maybe the barrier, but is also the solution. So we cannot, in my theoretical model that I created, I also see this as a bridge between theories of aging and theories of technology acceptance, which include the design aspect as well. And we cannot avoid that there are images on aging, and that ageism may have an impact, first of all, on the perspectives of designers on what they should design and how they design it. But this is also part of the solution. So, for example, higher involvement of older persons throughout the design process may reduce ageism, and this is something that I found quite prominent also in the scoping review. So from studies that did involve older persons from the beginning, they also discussed how this could reduce ageism and create a better design, not necessarily what they expected in the beginning, but also from the perspectives of older persons. So working together in collaboration can reduce ageism and eventually lead also to designs that are more desirable for the older persons themselves.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think I run out of time, so I short my final question, because simply you address the gap in knowledge about the potential role of ageism. And my question is, just briefly, how can these findings that you produce can be made accessible to really improve the design, use, and uptake of digital technology?
Highly esteemed opponent, I think it's a very important question. I think it starts also with policymakers, because much of the design of digital technology is policy-driven. And much of the focus of policymakers is, in the context of successful aging, is on context mainly focused on care and healthcare. So I think, first of all, policymakers should realize that, first of all, we should strive to design for more needs than just care and healthcare. But further along, policymakers as such have much power. And they can, for example, try to create an atmosphere in which design, in order to be funded, needs to share the perspectives of older persons, needs to be diverse also in the sense of which older persons are involved, how they are involved, but also what needs they attend to. So I would start from there, in short.
Yes, in short is the right keyword. Thank you very much for these great replies. It will be a pleasure to continue, but my time is over, and I think I have to hand over to the next opponent.
Thank you. So I hand over the word to the second opponent, Professor Breine.
Thank you, esteemed doctoral candidate. First of all, let me thank you for giving me the opportunity to read your thesis on, well, what I really believe to be is a really relevant topic, namely ageism and its relation to digital technology. And in particular, ageism as an underexplored barrier to the adoption sometimes of digital technologies, but also as a facilitating factor for the design of certain digital technologies, while sometimes not others. So quite often those are technologies focusing on medical needs or age-related problems. And I do think that this is a highly relevant topic because innovation in technology design and policy have indeed become an important arena in which societal definitions of aging and later life are being negotiated. So that's for me the most relevant part here is that technology is put squarely into the realm of the social science analysis of ageism as well. So when so much technology seems to be based on ageist idea of aging and older people, then we need to understand technology design and also technology policy as a powerful arena that lends credibility to, potentially aggravates existing forms of ageism, and also possibly creates new forms of ageism. And my first question then really relates to these later aspects, lending credibility and aggravating particular forms of ageism. And more specifically, when you say on page 172 of your thesis, modestly speaking, the findings of this dissertation alone cannot attest to creating new theories of aging and technology, but can mainly suggest the potential role of ageism as a bridge connecting the two, aging and technology. So I'd like to elaborate you a little bit more. My question then really relates if you can describe different forms through which ageism bridges aging and technology. So not just affecting technology, but really this bridging mechanism.
Highly esteemed opponent, thank you for that question and the opportunity to elaborate more on the model. In the beginning point of the dissertation, when I was trying to look at the existing theory, one of the notions that I saw a lot was that there is a gap in the theorization of aging in the intersection of technology. And modestly speaking, I think that the 5 studies that I've done, and with additional studies that started in recent years, do shed light on this intersection of ageism and digital technology. I think that where ageism meets digital technology most prominently, and that's why I think it bridges, is that digital technology is also involved in many aspects of our daily life. If it's, for example, I think a good example is social media. And there, this is a combination of how publications on social media, for example, can exacerbate how older adults are viewed. So the image of aging can also be enhanced to more negative or also more positive with technology. For example, the use of the meme, OK Boomer. So this is full of humor, and there are a lot of memes like this. But eventually, this creates a very difficult and negative view of older persons, and it's still socially acceptable. So I think the relevance also of ageism to digital technology is also about the social acceptability of it.
And then further to that, because what you're saying now is like the technology itself, again, lends credibility to certain ideas of aging and reinforces them. So I don't quite believe you that you refrain from theorizing. I think you did start theorizing these bridging effects between aging and technology. So maybe that's a bit more of a tricky question, but if you think this a little bit further, where would you see areas for theorizing this? So you discussed a lot of theories of ageism, but then technology. How would you go about theorizing if you would be pushed to do a little bit more theorizing? And I don't expect that you will provide a full answer, but just a few ideas on that.
Highly esteemed opponent, indeed tricky question. I attempt to theorize with this theoretical model. I think there's still a lot of work to be done. First of all, I did look at the context of digital technology very widely. And this could also be very different for different types of technology. So for example, in the context of healthcare, we could see different aspects of ageism that need to be tackled. For example, in the context of healthcare, it's highly relevant to work with healthcare professionals. But in the context of, for example, daily digital technologies, if it's banking or if it's commerce, here there's also an aspect of self-ageism or communication, intergenerational communication within families or within social communities. So I believe this model is, for me, a beginning point. I see this model, and that's why I say modestly, but for me, I see it as a beginning point also to explore additional contexts of digital technology, but also to further explore, for example, discrimination, which was touched only briefly in this dissertation. There was an intention to do more about discrimination, but due to COVID, I could not do that. But for example, a current study that is ongoing, we identified also with healthcare professionals that negative attitudes towards using technology can actually affect decisions not to offer digital technologies. And we found that in working on the publication. But that is to say that this model still needs exploration, also by using different methods, exploring to different contexts, also generalizability, because most of the research was done in the Netherlands and partly in Israel. But this also needs to be generalized. If I can add a last note on that, on theorizing, one of the most prominent theories that I work with here is successful aging, which is not one theory, it's a group of theories. And in relation to successful aging, there is a view that technology can help to successfully age. But at the moment, there is a gap, and there's actually no research pointing or showing at least successfully that technology can help to successful age. And here I do see in the middle ageism as a barrier.
Do you, and very brief last question, do you think that how we think about successful aging changes as a result of technologies devised at successful aging?
That is a tricky question as well. I believe that for older persons, this can be an opportunity, but as it is done at the moment, it can actually reduce the possibility to successfully age. If it's, for example, with... Yeah.
Thank you. I think we have to move on to the next question.
Thank you. I'm not sure if this want to work here. So I hand over the word now to Dr. Neva.
Esteemed doctoral candidate, in a couple of weeks, we will have the Social Gerontech Conference in Utrecht. At that conference, there will be a special session on ageism and technology, which shows your foresight in choosing this topic for a thesis, because it's highly topical, and I think it's also highly relevant. For a long time, I thought, why isn't anybody picking up this particular topic? I think it's very important, and then I met you. So many thanks for doing this important work. I have for you a number of questions. The first one is partly methodological and partly theoretical, and it pertains to your choice of empirical studies. You decided to do a number of quantitative studies, focus group study, literature reviews, but you decided not to try to study use practices and design practices as they go on. And that surprised me, because we know that in those practices, ageism is produced, also unwittingly. That sometimes things are done with the best intentions, but they end up with very ageist results. You seem to study more the thinking and the speech acts of ageism, and not the doing and the making of aging practice. And my question then is, does this mean that you fell into sort of the classical STS point of the missing masters, where you do not study what the active role of technology is in how ageism is also made very obdurate and very pressing in everyday life for older people?
Highly esteemed opponent, thank you very much for that question, because I think it's a very important point that I want to talk about as well. In a certain way, someone in the crowd, I won't point out who, also told me that I'm also standing on the sidelines of this aspect of the design process. And this is partially not because I didn't want to or think it's important. I completely agree that it's important also to go into the design process, because this is also part of the limitations of this dissertation, is that you don't also see the positive things that perhaps happen in the design process. So this is something I also reflected about my own maybe bias, looking through an ageism lens. And I think going into the design process is very important. Unfortunately, this was a plan actually for study 6, and I could not go into it because of COVID. I can say that what I would have wanted to do, and also I can say a bit about the future plans of how I see this. What I wanted to do originally was to observe actual design processes, and there try to look at ageism also by interviews, but also by looking at the design process. And for example, nonverbal communication that go between the designers and the older persons, how this forms and changes a long time. And a future way that I want to maybe do this is to try to, first of all, do this kind of observational study, but also to try to do a lab study in which you can take separately older persons and younger designers that have not designed for the context of aging per se, and to look at them together but separately in the beginning about a certain technological challenge, but then to join them together and also see what happens when you join them together. So also, we need to also try to measure, does this partnership have a positive effect? So at the moment, this is also theoretical. It's based maybe on experiences of others, as summarized in the scoping review, but to actually measure this as an intervention is still missing. So those are part of my future thoughts on how to tackle this, because I think it's a very valid point and one of the limitations of this dissertation.
I would welcome very much if you did so, and I would love to work on something like that, so let's discuss, but not here. My second question does also relate a bit to what kind of things we could be studying. I This is an observation, and my question is whether you agree or not and what it means for us. What I tend to see is that big companies and big universities working on technology projects for older people, ageism tend to be rife in those places. What I also see happening is that small and medium enterprises in the technology sector, so 2, 3, 4, maybe 10 employees, who are actively trying to produce technologies that will actually be used by older people, have a very different take on ageism. And they are very much more aligned with focusing on what older people actually need and what positions them in a very negative way and how to avoid that. So there's hope there, but there's also not a lot of studies going on these kind of companies. Do you share this observation, and what do you think that it would mean for researching ageism in the future?
Highly esteemed opponent. That is a difficult question because I don't actually know. From what I saw, the majority of the companies are focusing, at least from the scoping review, for example, is around 90% focusing on care and healthcare. And again, I think this is policy driven as well. There's much focus in the context of the opportunity of technology to help or solve some of the problems of aging, also with a view of what is the monetary, what is the cost benefit of doing so. But if we look at it also, step back from a theoretical perspective, I think this actually needs to happen more, because when we look, for example, on the aspect of activity, and activity is not only walking out of the house to have a better health, but it's also social activity, it's also leisure, it's also learning. These are all kind of activities that with technology we can improve the well-being and improve the health, and by not directly going at health. So I would want to see this more as well, but it's hard for me to say what is the actual proportion. From what I could assess, the proportion is very low.
See whether there is any time left.
Maybe for a second round then, if that is okay.
Yeah. Would you agree that one of the observations that I and my colleague here have made in the past is that the end product of a lot of technological projects that claim to be for older people is not actually to produce a technology that works for older people, but it's technology projects for technology's sake. And then ageism becomes a completely irrelevant category because they don't care what older people say. To me, that's a big problem because we're spending money sort of towards what we claim to be projects for older people that doesn't go there at all. And this feeds into a lot of the ageist problems that you also studied.
Highly esteemed opponent, I do agree with that comment. More than that, though, I think it's a question of what happens when those technologies are not adopted. And there it can go to two ways. One way is, okay, it can enhance these ageist perceptions. Okay, they don't use it because they cannot use it. That is one direction. But another direction is to try to view what did we do wrong in the design process. And several also studies in scoping, but also from the perspective of the older persons, did talk about what happens when you identify that it's not being used, and then a redesign process needs to happen. And I think what was interesting, and kind of a paradox even, this kind of speed versus cost paradox, is that some reflected in hindsight that if they would have invested more time in the design process to really achieve and view the needs, the actual needs, and to get the actual feedback before running forward with the design, it would have been cheaper than later on needing to redesign something that was already, let's say, manufactured but not actually used.
I agree. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I give over the word to Dr. Liu.
Esteemed doctorate candidate, thank you very much for hearing your PhD thesis and giving today a very structured and clear presentation to us. I started to read your thesis with great joy and also with very high satisfaction afterwards. I really appreciate your contribution to the understanding of design digital technology for and with older adults, including the perspective of ageism. I was really glad when I reached your theoretical model where you expand the ageism understanding from the individual level to the multiple perspectives, including micro, meso, and macro. So that was really nice to read. And I have prepared some questions to you, and I would like to start with that. In chapter 3, and you actually summarize the literature review, and you identified a set of ethical considerations and guidelines in order to deal with designing digital technology for and with older adults. In the first topic, you mentioned awareness of stereotypes and ageism is very important. Among others, you refer to universal design as a very suitable approach to tackle this, to really help people to avoid discrimination and to support inclusiveness. And we know that universal design in layman language is like designing one product services for all, because we don't want to discriminate. Everybody should be able to use the design without any adaptation. It was a concept designed without, like before the digital technology was introduced. On the other hand, inclusive design was really a concept that came together with digital technology. That there people say, hey, everybody should have a different design that fits their own specific conditions. We know that in your thesis, we also learned older adults are very diverse from their social, cultural, political, and economic circumstances. And if we add the ageism as an extra layer, it makes it very complex. What will be your strategy? What will be your advice to a design team to look at the universal design, inclusive design? How should they go with it? What will be the strategy? Could you please advise us on that?
Esteemed opponent, thank you very much for that question. There's actually two aspects here. There's the aspect, I think, of design for all, or perhaps accessibility, that we can talk about, and there's the aspect of attending to specific needs also, and also inclusive design, which also relates to maybe how people are involved. I think reflecting on this, you're relating to the first study that I performed, and I think from a more mature perspective, also at the final point of this dissertation, I view this that these are two actually separate aspects. On the one hand, designing technologies that are accessible, also in manners of physical access, but also accessibility in the sense of, for example, people talk a lot about the size of the font, information on the screen, and so on, is important for older persons, but for everyone, actually. It's also for every age, or also people with disabilities, and so on. So designing, for example, digital services that will be accessible is important. On the other hand, there is a matter of changing motivations and emotions, if to follow, for example, with the socio-emotional selectivity theory. There are different emotions and motivations as we age. And for that, we need to also attend to specific needs. Here, however, we do see a paradox, and also with Dr. Neven, I talked about this a moment ago, that we see that there's a disproportionate focus on specific needs, whereas when we ask older persons, would you want to use these technologies, healthcare and care technologies, many times they will say, yes, it looks like a good technology, it's solidly designed, but it's not for me, at least not now. I would want to use maybe later if I will need it. But currently I would want other things. I would want things that focus on, like we said, leisure, fun, family, social connections. And this at the moment is disproportionate. So I would advise to raise the proportion of attending to other needs, which could also develop. So what the needs are today in 2023 could be different in 10 years. So we need to constantly involve, and that is also the part of the inclusive design, is that we need to ask the people that we are designing for, is this for you? And also try to see if we are designing with the right people, because that was also a bias identified in this dissertation, that many times we are designing with the wrong population. So older adults are very diverse, and just involving older adults is not enough. For example, with fall preventions, we cannot involve people that are very, very active and even find it offensive to talk about fall prevention when they don't feel that they are actually needing or there.
So you basically say when we are designing, we should really differentiate what should be the universal part. And also attending specific needs. So in a design, as a design team, you need to prioritize and categorize the different functionality and needs there.
Esteemed opponent, I believe that is so. And perhaps the question designers need to also ask themselves is, who are they designing for, and could it be for additional populations? So just as an example of a technology that I recently read about, and you see quite a lot with medication dispensers. And that is sometimes thought as for older persons because perhaps they use more medications, but that could also be for people with any age. And we know that, at least from where I come from in Israel, almost 20% of the population has some kind of disability that they are dealing with. So perhaps this kind of technology is not only for older persons, but also for people of every age, if we're talking about 20% of the population that might benefit from something like that. And again, there might be adaptations for people with specific disabilities, or older people, or younger people as well, if it's for children, for example.
Thank you very much. Do I still have a bit of time? Yes. Thank you very much. If I continue on that, so we agree that university design is a good strategy to increase accessibility. We also agree inclusiveness is very important to attend to specific needs. So in your thesis, you also wrote about co-designing with older adults. You're mentioning that you really want to work on this, removing the stigmatization. You need to involve the older adults, not only as an informant or as a person just to evaluate the design, but starting from the beginning to the end. I'm just wondering whether you're familiar with what is the dropout rate for older adults to participate in co-design process. Are you aware of this number?
Sorry, aware?
Dropout rate, like how much, what is the percentage for older adults really go through a design process with the design team from beginning to the end?
Thank you for that question. It's at the moment, it seems pretty low. So also a previous study, not my own, identified that the involvement or meaningful involvement is very low. And in my own study, I saw that the percentage of involvement throughout the design process is very low. I think around 35% of the studies in the scoping review that I did involved throughout the design process. But importantly also, I think there is a continuum here of how we look at involvement and also partnership. So the ideal situation that most of the perspectives identified was a whole partnership from the beginning towards the end. And in the purely sense of co-design, participatory design, this means that power needs to be shared in the decision-making of certain decisions in the design process. But this can also be a continuum. So how power is shared, even if it is involved from the beginning until the end.
That continuum also comes with cognitive and physical load. So older adults have to continuously joining the design team, pay attention to it, joining discussions, giving comments, giving feedback. Having democracy in such a co-design also means responsibility and work. How would you advise the team to manage that? Because some older adults may just drop out. Some of them may even pass away during that design process.
Listening opponent, that is indeed a challenge. But for example, with the perspective of the older adults who did participate in such design processes, they really saw it as ideally as a partnership in which it's a win-win. So for them, it's a contribution. They feel a sense of accomplishment. They don't want necessarily any monetary compensation for this. And also, it's not for everyone. So what the ideal partnership was described as also creating some kind of community. So there's some kind of give and take, and not only using the participants in order to inform the design, but for example, a technology company or a university, what can they also give the participants? Can they also, for example, provide physical space to do training on digital technology, not related to the design process? So this sense of partnership or even community can be even broader than just the design process, and that is the part of what is in it for them. And that is the pure ultimate partnership that was also discussed in the focus group study.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. And now I give the word to Professor Laux.
Thank you. Esteemed doctoral candidate, congratulations with this interesting and very important thesis, and also congratulations for your supervisors. For me, your work is an urgent call to prevent ageism. You show that we need to find ways to balance between doing the right things to involve all the adults without stereotyping them. And although I like the technical part of your dissertation, that's not the main theme of our discussion. I want to focus on ageism and the practical application of that. Well, as you know, my expertise is on nursing home care, and I find it very important that scientific knowledge is implemented and applied in care practice, and that care practice is improved by it. Therefore, I invite you to inspire me by elaborating on ageism in nursing homes. And you have to be aware, I think you are aware, that most of nursing home residents have severe cognitive and physical impairments, and that the majority of professionals working in nursing homes is practically trained. So please elaborate on how ageism in nursing homes can be prevented. How can awareness of ageism in nursing homes be raised? And what kind of research could be of value for this sector?
Highly esteemed opponent, thank you for the opportunity to reflect on this aspect that was not the main, of course, setting in my dissertation, which, by the way, I regret. I hope in the future to also enter the aspects of nursing homes in relation to technology, also directly and not only from the sidelines. I think nursing homes and in general the medical sometimes setting can be prone to a lot of ageism, mainly because the people that are there meet the so-called stereotypical image of older persons as frail and with cognitive decline and physical decline. Nevertheless, I think we see also a movement from medical models of also nursing homes of how even the setting of how a nursing home looks like. Does it look like a medical ward, or does it look like a home? And here we do see also shifts to a more to culture change, to more social models, in which also this is also a matter of co-designing, for example, how this home might look like. And the perspective of older persons could be valuable here. And this is, again, a matter of sharing power. So do, for example, the staff stand behind a stand, nursing desk, or is there no desk? That's actually things I studied before this PhD. But this is something that talking with the older persons, how would you want this residence to look like? How would you want technologies to be involved, if I'm connecting back to technology? How would you want technologies to be incorporated or used here? So also sharing the power in the decision could shape how the nursing home is, and also this could increase or decrease interaction that is positive or negative between the staff and the residents.
But the medical model that you mentioned, that's still present in nursing homes, but the shift is towards a person-centered care model, in which the home-like environment, the client is at the center. That's the point of departure. But still, how do we prevent ageism?
Highly esteemed opponent, so I will elaborate on how do we prevent ageism, and I think there are several things we should relate to. First of all, it's a matter of training and awareness. And one of the things that I also saw in the dissertation, but also in communication, for example, with healthcare students, where I worked at Fontes, is that there is very low awareness and very low training, first of all, into what it means to age. So naturally, in a nursing home, I think they are more trained in what it means to age. But there's low awareness.
Professionals, you mean? Training of professionals?
Yes, training of professionals. But I think also the training in what is ageism, how can it affect? That is a main aspect that needs to be addressed. I think also it needs to be acknowledged that the working in a nursing home is highly, there's high demand on staff. And that's also something perhaps to tackle, how staff have more training also to empower them, but also to give them tools how they can empower the residents. Because while the residents, many of the residents there are with cognitive decline, it does not mean that they cannot be meaningfully involved in decisions that relate to not only technology, but how their life looks like in the residence. Is it more like a home? Is it more like a community? Is it allowed to put pictures on the walls in the corridor? Is there a desk for the nurses or not? These are all decisions that could be made only by the staff or in collaboration. And there are models, for example, from the top of my head, something I did in the past, regenerative community, that allow this communication that is a bit participatory also in order to make decisions about the daily routines in nursing home, how the treatment is provided and so on.
Yeah. Well, that is my second question. You talk a lot about involving the end users or all the adults, but the nursing home residents, how would you involve them in research?
Highly esteemed opponent, there are ways to involve. So if to take two different perceptions, for example, in the scoping review that I could see, one perception, more influenced by stereotypes, I would say, was that we cannot involve them because we don't know if their opinions are trustworthy because they might have cognitive decline. In another group of studies in the same comparison say that it is possible and we need to find the ways to do it. So for example, consent. This is a major issue that many people do not want to tackle because they think, can people with cognitive decline, with dementia, with Alzheimer, willingly and knowingly consent to participate? And there are holistic ways also to view consent as an ongoing process. So we can talk about consent once, but we can also talk about consent after 5 minutes in the interview or when involving. Or for example, if we notice distress, we can ask, is this pleasant for you or not? So also the concept of consent can be more holistic and looking at more aspects. It's also a matter of choosing the setting. So for example, if we co-design in a quiet room that is illuminated in an hour that is fitting for the person, or do we do it in a very noisy room right after lunch? Can have a different perspective on whether this will be a successful experience for the older person and for the designer or not. So there are a lot of guidelines also how to do this with, for example, people with dementia. So I would say it's possible. It, of course, might take more effort, but I would say it's also worth it because we cannot assume to know for people with dementia what they would want without asking them.
Thank you.
Thank you. And now I give the word to our last opponent, Professor Bongers.
Esteemed doctoral candidates, first of all, also my congratulations with your PhD thesis, also, of course, for the supervisors. And I've read it with very much pleasure, and I got inspired by the topic. We already discussed it sometimes earlier, but when I read your complete thesis, I got also inspired of what you have done. It is so much, and how well you perform the various types of research activities. The mixed model, the mixed methods designs are impressive, actually. And besides the various articles you published, I was especially interested and also impressed by you giving an integration of, you could say, the findings of the 6 studies you've performed into your theoretical model, your conceptual model. However, of course, there are still questions asked. That model is 2 layers, and the findings on which that model is based are gathered within a Western society. In 2 countries, mainly in the Netherlands, also some in Israel. And I would like to elaborate you somewhat more whether those findings would have been the same if you gathered your findings in different countries.
Highly esteemed opponent, thank you for the opportunity to elaborate on this. An assumption that is in the model but is not illustrated there is also the person fit or the environmental aspect. And I think this is a very important issue. And just as an anecdote is using technology a matter of age or not, if we look even in Europe, it is not one homogeneous continent in how people use technology. We see in the data from the Eurostat that, for example, in Bulgaria, 30% of people above 65 use the internet, whereas in the Netherlands it's close to 90%. So I think for sure if I would do this whole study in Bulgaria or in a different country in which the general use of technology is lower, this could have generated different results. I think it is also a matter not only what country you look at, but also within the population. So the environment could also be living in a city comparing to living in the countryside, more disadvantaged population groups, such as people who are poor or without even physical access or the ability to buy, for example, the best smartphone, if to say. So I think, again, there's a lot still to do. For me, this model is only the beginning point. And that relates to a previous question. That's why, modestly, I only see this as a beginning point. And there's a lot of work to be done in order to really generalize it to different contexts, different technologies, and also different societies.
Thank you very much for the answer. Because it brings me to another layer, you could say. You say now that there are differences in context, you could say, within, over countries. And your layers, especially the second one on the right, you could say, where you see the micro, meso, and macro levels of phases. I would like to dive into the meso and the macro part, because imagine if you live in Africa or 80 years ago in a culture, and the culture I would like to pinpoint, in a culture where older people are or were valued for their knowledge, their expertise, and their wisdom, actually. Would it change the interdependencies and the interrelations between, especially, the right part of your model?
Highly esteemed opponent, it's a super relevant question. I think there's also an assumption, maybe also stereotypical, that in certain cultures, maybe there's less ageism because some cultures are more collectivistic comparing to individualistic. But what we see, and also talking with colleagues from other countries from Asia, from Africa, there are also changes, very big changes in these countries in how the family is built. If it's relating to urbanization, for example, whereas more traditionally families would live together, and in some cultures the youngest child takes care of the parents, whereas today there's also urbanization and people go to another city to study in a university, and this is also changing. So we see ageism also as a challenge. That's the first thing I want to say. We see ageism also as a challenge, also in different cultures. That said, I think there are still differences. One thing I am doing today to try to explore this a bit more, the scale that was developed in the dissertation, the Atwat scale. We're currently also, in my postdoc, translating this into Hebrew, but also Chinese. And there we can do, for example, a cross-cultural comparison. So that is one example of a cross-cultural comparison that we can do in research, but I think this needs to be broadened. I think we need to do more of these cross-cultural comparisons, and I hope to do some myself.
If I may, yes. Suppose you get a grant to do that cross-cultural comparison. Where do you think, what are your hypotheses actually with regard to your model? Where do you think are the cross-cultural differences?
Highly esteemed opponent, it's a difficult question because it can be different on different aspects. First of all, in relation to how we approach older persons, like you said, are they perceived with more wisdom, or how manners of respect are addressed? But I think also in relation to how technology is viewed. So for example, if in some countries there are restrictions to using technology, and that is again on the macro level, legislation. So if some countries restrict, for example, access to the internet or access to information, how does that affect? That's a very tricky thing. I'm not sure what I would expect to find there.
The session is adjourned for deliberation, so please await the committee's return. Thank you. The doctoral board of Tilburg University has taken note of your dissertation. Having heard your defense, the doctoral board has decided to confer on you the doctoral degree. The professor, Evelyn Wouters, is authorized to invest you with this dignity.
It gives me great pleasure to accept the task assigned to me by the Rector Magnificus of the University. By virtue of the authority granted to us by the law and by the regulations of the University, in accordance with the decision by the Doctoral Board of Tilburg University, I hereby promote you, Itay Mannheim, to doctor. You acquire hereby all the rights that by law or custom are or will be attached to the doctorate. Apart from rights, a doctorate also comes with obligations. These, first of all, include the execution of research and all other scholarly activities with the utmost integrity. The privilege of being a doctor also entails that society needs to be able to rely on the sound and independent judgment of those holding a doctorate. Do you promise to act according to the principles of scientific integrity in future scientific research?
Yes, I promise.
As proof of you having been awarded the title of doctor, I hand you the certificate signed by the Rector Magnificus and the supervisors and confirmed with the university's seal of approval.
I perform a pleasant task, learned, sir, in congratulating you on behalf of Tilburg University's doctoral board with the dignity acquired. I would now like to give the floor to the supervisor for the pronunciation of his laudation. So please be seated.
Highly esteemed Dr. Mannheim, dear Itay, what a great pleasure and privilege it is to stand here and give this speech to you. We first met on Skype a long time ago, as it seems. But actually, it was less than 5 years ago that we met for the very first time. To be exact, on Friday, August the 31st, 2018 in the afternoon. Yvonne and I met you on Skype. Somewhere at the 4th floor of the Theodor Vlietner building in Eindhoven. Yvonne and I met you there in a Skype meeting for a job interview for the PhD position in the Horizon 2020 Ageism grant. Skype at that time was a tool sometimes used, but not very much appreciated yet. Especially for job interviews, it was not considered very suitable. You were in Israel, Yvonne and I in the Netherlands, so we had no choice. And actually, we've never doubted the quality of our online choice to award you the position as a PhD candidate for this really ambitious scientific project. And on top of that, the challenge to be part of the educational program of Fontys University of Applied Science, which is mandatory in our department. Also, we could not then foresee that in the coming years, due to COVID, we would need to use online meetings quite a lot. The project, as I said, was part of the Horizon 2020 Ageism, which entailed a lot of extra work and European collaboration. This, on the one hand, was interesting, rewarding, and generated a lot of impact. And on the other hand, it was quite challenging and left you and Yvonne with a lot of extra work. For you, participating in this project was not as simple as for most candidates. You needed to move your family, including Ofje, at that time a toddler, currently quite a lady, to the Netherlands. An adventure that you entered into seemingly very smoothly. You made many friends along the way and became a much appreciated colleague and teacher. One scene I remember at the very beginning is me meeting you at the cycling path along the river Dommel in Eindhoven. I was cycling towards Fontys and you and Tom were cycling the opposite way to the municipality to see to some important administrative obligations. You found a place to live and soon met Jaron, with whom you could communicate in Hebrew. That is, I think, exemplary for the entire time of your stay in the Netherlands, and I guess also elsewhere in the world. You were able to be a friend and make friends in a smooth and natural way. And also the theme of your PhD project was complex. You entered an entirely new era of your research on ageism in a digital world, a subject that needed to be explored from scratch. Although the subject was roughly described in the project plan, you needed and was able to translate it into relevant research questions. These, on the one hand, did right to the still immature position of the subject, and on the other hand, it addressed not only the use side of digital technology by older adults, but also the design side. And even after the original plans were disrupted due to COVID, you changed in a creative and flexible manner the original plan without changing the aim of the project. Also, you mastered several scientific research methods, both qualitative and quantitative, which you successfully applied in your research. Mostly, I admire your sincere and research-minded curiosity. This, I believe, resulted in a fundamental change in thinking about how age played a role in technology acceptance. As I already mentioned, Fontys, and especially Fontys School of Allied Health Professions, values and obliges to connect research and teaching. Not the easiest thing for many PhD students, especially a challenge when Dutch is not your mother tongue. Nevertheless, you worked in many projects together with the colleagues of the Technology in Healthcare team. You supervised and inspired students and worked together with other teachers, for instance, together with Frank Antonissen, who you managed to really address age and ageism in the curriculum. Exemplary for your popularity, after leaving the Netherlands back to Israel, students spontaneously proposed to hold petition to keep you, at least partly, to our school. If I would try to summarize you as a person, I would say that you are a modest and kind person and at the same time assertive and passionate. You really care for people, not only older people. This, amongst others, Yvonne experienced when she visited Israel with her daughter, who unfortunately fell ill. You really took care for them to be admitted to the healthcare facilities. But also, you are someone who is able to merge in different cultures, easily and successfully. You moved from Israel to the Netherlands, but also you worked at Tilburg University and Fontys. Although only an external PhD candidate, you managed to attend the meetings of two academic collaborative centers, the Academic Collaborative Center of Social and Technological Innovation in Healthcare and the Academic Collaborative Center Older Adults, but also the Trends of Team meetings and the Aging Network Tilburg University. At Fontys, you were a true member of the Technology in Healthcare team. You worked, amongst others, together with Rens, Deborah and Mark in the Diabetes Podiatry Food app and the Wearable Sensor Technology research led by Manon Peters. And of course, you had many project-related duties in the consortium as well. And this is only the work-related part. As already mentioned, you also made many friends outside work. And speaking about adaptation in cultures, you managed to bake perfect Dutch pancakes. Not only students regretted your leave, but also all your colleagues. Fortunately, we can still work together in projects, amongst others, in the diabetes podiatry research and in the wearable research. And please remember, there's always a tiny house in the hills of the south of the Netherlands available for you and a postal box in Eindhoven, big enough to receive your letters. A lot has happened in the past 4.5 years, not only in the world surrounding us, but also in your private life. And amidst all of this, you carried on without ignoring the difficulties, pain and challenges you met on your path. This, I think, is perhaps typical for you as a person. I think wherever you go, you will be of great value for those who work and live with you. We all have experienced this in the last years, and I'm truly grateful for that. Dear Itay, enjoy this beautiful day. Take the time to relish all you're already reached and will reach in future. We will follow you closely and keep in touch.
This brings us to the end of the academic session. On behalf of the doctoral board of Tilburg University, I would like to thank the committee members. And now I would like to give the opportunity to Professor Morten Klingebiel, who joins us in Zoom, to congratulate the young doctor. And the committee members who, Professor Morten Klingebiel, who joins us, you can leave then afterwards when the cortege leaves the room. Now I give the word to you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Dr. Mannheim, my congratulations from the distance. It's a pity that I was not able to join, but it was a pleasure to read, get inspired and to discuss, and well, wish you the best for the career that comes after the PhD, though, so the real career. So thank you very much.
May I ask the guests who are present in the auditorium to leave the room after the cortege, row by row, starting with the family and guests in the first row. And I now close the session. May I invite you to stand up and ask the professors to leave up the caps. For our blessings, we thank you, who lives, loves through all eternity. Amen. The session is closed.